We must make the hard choices to reduce the cost of health care and the size of our deficit.
Yes, we must make hard choices to reduce the deficit. But although the president said that, he doesn't propose hard choices. He doesn't cut much of anything. And in his long inaugural address Monday, he mentioned debt once. He basically dismissed it the next sentence, saying, "We reject the belief that America must choose between caring for the elderly and investing in the next generation. Apparently no choices need be made. The government's Santa Claus." But we can't afford Santa Claus. I'm grateful to Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform. He got many politicians to pledge not to raise taxes. Good. Taxes are high enough. And it was thought that the tax limits would starve the beast, the beast being Washington, and beast is a good term for Washington, but starving the beast hasn't worked. Even tax-cutting politicians just keep spending. And as Milton Friedman taught me, spending is a far more accurate gauge of government's burden. Every dollar government spends is a dollar taxed away from someone. If it's borrowed, it sets the stage for higher taxes later. If government prints more dollars to fund spending, our purchasing power falls. It's all a tax on our future. Instead of politicians pledging not to raise taxes, what we really need are politicians pledging not to raise spending. And now, finally, we've got that, thanks to Jonathan Bidlack of the Coalition to Reduce Spending, which came up with this Reject the Debt pledge. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, the pledge basically asks candidates to commit to three things. One, that they'll only vote for balanced budgets. Two, that they won't vote for any new spending that isn't offset elsewhere in the budget. And three, that they won't vote to increase borrowing or the debt ceiling.
And anybody sign it?
We did. We had 24 candidates who signed. Two who
you just started this year?
We did, this election cycle. And so the two who were elected were Senator Cruz from Texas and Doug Collins, a representative from Georgia.
But that means most of them lost.
True. Well, I mean, obviously this is not something that's easy to sign, right? It's very easy to say you're not going to raise taxes. It's another thing to say that you're not going to vote to increase borrowing or continue spending.
I'll sign it, though I don't count here because I'm not a politician. But I get the part that says, therefore, I pledge I will not vote to authorize or fund new programs without offsetting cuts in others. But this one, I will not vote for any budget that's not balanced. That seems unrealistic because you don't need to balance if you just slow the growth of government in 10 years, you could get us out of trouble. But balanced budget's not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, the budget is a blueprint, right? So the budget is not the be-all, end-all. I mean, the big problem is that we haven't even passed the budget in the last, or the Senate hasn't passed the budget in the last 3.5 years. So, to be honest, that plank of the pledge is in the current political environment less relevant than the other two.
And no incumbents have signed the pledge.
That's correct.
Though Ted Cruz is now an incumbent, so I think
that's right. And Ted Cruz, for all we know, could end up being a great fiscal conservative senator. He could end up being a completely unfiscal conservative senator. But at least now we have him on the record to the point where if he ends up voting for unbalanced budget, if he votes for new spending programs, voters and the press and activists can actually hold him accountable.
A Fox News poll asked people, government spending is out of control or managed carefully. In 2009, 62% said out of control, but by this year, 83%. So if people think that, why is it so hard to cut?
Well, I think part of it is that people don't have a mechanism. They don't know what they can do to actually solve the problem, right? If you ask the studio audience here, maybe this audience isn't the most representative sample, but
no.
If you went to a coffee shop around the corner and you said that,
well, they're not representative either. This is
true. This is true. If you went to a coffee shop in some other place and you asked, if you said, you're making $5,000 a month, but you're spending $10,000, what do you need to do? The average person's not going to say, well, I need to go to my boss and ask for a $5,000 raise. They're not going to say, oh, I need to cut out my Starbucks. They're going to say, I need to fundamentally reassess what I'm spending my money on. So people get that in their personal lives, but they don't always make the connection to the political sphere, and part of that reason is because they don't have a mechanism to hold people in the political sphere accountable when they don't act in the way that they would in their own personal lives. And that's why I think the pledge is important.
And the other reason maybe the poll misleads is that everybody says, yeah, let's cut spending.
Right.
But when you get to the specifics, should it be defense? Should it be Medicare? Should we kill the drug war? Then people, no, you can't except these people.
But you know what? It's surprising. Rasmussen did a poll last month that showed that 48% of Americans believe that everything in the budget should be on the table as a means of balancing the budget. So that's the highest that poll has ever shown. It was something like a 4 or 5% increase from the last time Rasmussen asked the question. So when you talk about it in the context of the debt, people start to get that we have a spending problem.
Thank you, Jonathan Bidlack. Hope lots of people sign this thing. Next, the audience gets to ask the questions, and then Senator Barack Obama, politician I long for.
It took 42 presidents, 224 years, to run up only $1 trillion worth of foreign-held debt.
Questions for my guests. Mark Meckler, who founded the biggest Tea Party group, the Goldwater Institute's Starley Rhodes. Daniel Garza, who wants immigrants made legal. And Jonathan Bidlack, who wants politicians to pledge not to increase spending. So first, from my Facebook page, Susan Cross says about executive orders. What are the limits? And who made the most during their presidency? So what is an executive order and what are the limits?
You know, executive orders are something that's used by presidents supposedly to allow them to execute the law or their other duties. They're not actually specified in the Constitution, and there are no specified limits. And presidents have used them in a variety of ways, but they seem to get more and more expansive. And frankly, they're a way to create an imperial presidency. There really are no limits on them.
And the worst, I happen to know this was not Barack Obama or even FDR. It was Teddy Roosevelt, who issued 1,000 executive orders, including one that tried to change the language. He said words should be spelled phonetically. Kissed should be K-I-S-T, and enough, E-N-U-F. And only because Congress, with a 2/3 vote, voted against that, did that not happen. So who has a question here?
My question is, when do you think the government will get serious about cutting the debt? What will it take, basically?
Riots, chaos in the street, massive inflation.
I think it's going to take a change in incentives. The problem is that for elected officials right now, if you think about would they want to cut spending or would they want to increase spending, all of their incentives are on the side of increasing spending. They have lobbying groups that are pushing for various pieces of spending. So there needs to be something on the other side, right?
And everybody who comes to Washington, they aren't saying cut spending, they're saying, oh, this group so much needs help and this program is so good. 99% of the testimony they hear is for more spending.
Right, and I think it's time for an advocacy organization on the other side of that equation to show that there's actually a movement of people out there who care about this issue enough to vote on it.
We took a look a couple of years ago at state capitals as well, because of course states all across the country are facing the very same problems with spending. And in most state capitals, lobbyists that are paid for by government funds, taxpayer-funded lobbyists, outnumber private sector lobbyists 10-1. So when you think about the dynamic that creates for state lawmakers too, when everybody that's coming to lobby them is government-funded.
What is a government-paid lobbyist? What does that mean?
So somebody who's paid to lobby for a city, or they're the county lobbyist, or they lobby for the state health care program, they lobby for the state environmental office, they lobby for the state universities,
more money for our cause,
for state schools. Yeah.
And John, these are folks that are politically connected as well. So we have cronyism that is at play here. So if you're affluent and connected, you're going to get part of the pie.
One more, yeah.
Disregarding the morality or ethics of a law, in this case immigration, it is the law. So to what extent is it morally acceptable to break the law?
It is not acceptable, but again, because it's being broken so much, and property and lives are not being lost here. What you have is you've criminalized the relationship between the private sector and an individual. So why not legalize that relationship and give us that competitive advantage and improve the marketplace? So we don't have these market deficiencies if you have a loss between labor and capital.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Coming up, why I wish President Obama was more like he used to be. And you'll be amazed at what he once said. Did you watch the inaugural ceremony this week? Well, let me ask you, how many of you watched the inauguration? Minority of you. Well, we watched so you don't have to. I thought President Obama started out okay.
The patriots of 1776 did not fight to replace the tyranny of a king with the privileges of a few.
Yes, America doesn't need the tyranny of a king or the tyranny of the privileged few. But then the president went on to say he and a privileged few should force the rest of us to do a zillion things.
Together, together, together.
He kept saying the word together.
We must do these things together.
But what together means to big government folks is that they have a vision, and all of us, together, must go deeper into debt to pay for their vision, even if we disagree. Well, we can afford this, apparently, as the president told John Boehner last month, because America does not have a spending problem. But, of course, we do have a spending problem and a debt problem. I prefer Senator Barack Obama, the man who said this.
I'm here today to talk about America's debt problem. The fact that we are here to debate raising America's debt limit is a sign of leadership failure and our government's reckless fiscal policies.
Right, raising the debt limit is a failure. Okay, it was in 2006 when he was not yet president, when he said that. But then he still cared about the debt. We can't find the actual video of him saying that on the Senate floor, but here are his words. We took the text from the congressional record.
Over the past 5 years, our federal debt has increased from $3.5 trillion to $8.6 trillion. And yes, I said trillion with a T.
Again, his words. He was right then to worry about the debt.
That's money we have borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund, borrowed from China and Japan, and borrowed from American taxpayers. This rising debt is a hidden domestic enemy, robbing our cities and our states of critical investments in infrastructure, robbing our families and our children, and robbing our seniors of the retirement and health security they've counted on for all these years.
Exactly. Our national debt is a hidden domestic enemy. And I was glad to discover that in 2006, the future president was upset about the interest on our debt.
Every dollar we pay in interest, that's a dollar that's not going to investments in America's priorities. If Washington were serious, we would see an effort to reduce our debt by returning to responsible fiscal policies.
Yes, we would, if Washington were serious. The real President Obama looks serious, but he isn't. He ignores what he was right to be upset about just 7 years ago. The congressional record shows that Senator Obama said this about the Bush administration. It took 42 presidents 224 years to run up only $1 trillion of foreign-held debt. This administration did more than that in just 5 years. And he was right. The Bush administration did that. But now Obama's administration has done much worse. They've run up another $6 trillion in debt. How is that possible when just a few years ago, Barack Obama believed this?
America has a debt problem. I therefore intend to oppose the effort to increase America's debt limit.
Yet this year, President Obama demanded Congress raise the debt limit without conditions. I want the old Barack Obama back. He made sense. The new guy, he scares the heck out of me. I fear he's going to bankrupt my country. And that's our show. I'm John Stossel. We'll be back next week.